17, I saw that movie on TV, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I could really empathize with the characters in it. They were nervous, kind of timid people, you know. And I just said to myself, I'm going to end up in a psychiatric hospital. I knew it. But also around that age, 16 or so, we started having, going to discos, asking girls out, getting summer jobs. Now, I was doing this, trying to keep it up with my peers, but I found it terribly stressful. And I didn't tell anybody how stressful it was or how difficult it was. Back then, there was no real awareness of mental health or talk about mental health. And so apart from seeing that film and knowing that I was kind of a nervous type, I didn't know much about mental health. All I knew was that I was struggling and I was finding it difficult and I was nervous, and alienated. I think probably the strongest word that resonates with me is alienation. Maybe if I could backtrack, as a little kid now in school, I did feel quite differently from day one. Sometimes I'd walk around with the other kids, or play with the other kids in the yard. Quite often I walked around my own. And there was also something probably quite telling. I think as a kid now, my mother used to give me cheese sandwiches the whole time. And every time I was in the schoolyard at lunchtime, I'd throw the cheese sandwiches over the wall, over into the same garden. And for some reason, I never said to my mother, I don't like cheese sandwiches. So that kind of gives the background. I was kind of alienated, all right. I think from a young age now, I withdrew into myself, into my mind. So I wasn't very emotional. I didn't show my true colors as such, I think, as I said, around that 16, 17 years of age, I think you're starting to move out in the world. You're starting to take on responsibilities. You're leaving childhood behind you.
And when did it develop from a suspicion that you might be different to
knowing that you had a mental illness as such? Yeah. Well, okay. First year I was in college, I went to work in England that summer. And that particular summer, I was working in a small, kind of like a garden city north of London, Stevenage. And that summer, I was very stressed out. I was working in a warehouse. I say I came very close to having a breakdown. I remember writing to my auntie and letting not mention how I was, as always, just keeping up a good front, saying, I'm living in digs, I'm working, I'm keeping it good, etc. But the very next year, I went back to work in London again, this time in London on the building sites. And I say about halfway through the summer, I actually got my first depression. Now, I had no idea what depression was. I just thought I was losing my mind, So I remember, I knew this was serious. I knew this was mental illness. But as always, I kept it to myself. And one day when it was really bad, I walked off the building site and got an airplane back to Dublin. And that autumn, I went back to college, but I was still a bit depressed. Like that, I was keeping up the front. But at that stage, I couldn't keep up the front anymore. I had to drop out of that course. Now, I could go back and finish it at any time, but I dropped out. So at that stage, yes, I knew, yes, I got a problem. Looking back, I've had many depressions since, but that was particularly dark depression and more stressful because at that time, as I said, I wasn't, I didn't have the support and I wasn't communicating with people. So, and it was the first depression, so it was really bad. It was a very, very dark place altogether. And I didn't know how to talk to people about it. So it was very hard to struggle along with it yourself. It was,
Did it impact on a daily basis? How would you spend a lot of time in bed, or would you stop eating, or what kind of effect did it have?
Well, on depressions, probably after that now, I often remembered just hard getting out of bed, but I'd force myself to get out of bed. Otherwise I would just stew. And quite often I just didn't have the motivation to do anything, So if I had to do anything, I really had to push myself. funny enough, and obviously socializing was very difficult, but over the years I made friends in Grow. So that helped. When you have a friend that you feel safe around and you can be yourself, it's good. And actually, quite often over the years, sometimes, not always, but sometimes just being with somebody that understood, that was kind, could give me a lift. So that's, yes, so that's how depression affected me, all right, you know. Now, that was the start. I was eventually diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar. So the bipolar was the mood disorder part. So I was prone to get some elations and some depressions. But also the schizophrenic part was, I suppose, fears, but delusions, and even during florid episodes, you might even hallucinate, hear voices as well, actually. Now, as I said, I had my first depression when I was about 21 and had the first elation when I was 23. But that, no, sorry, when I was 23, I had my first psychotic episode. Now, with that psychotic episode, like I had no understanding of this at all. And when it hit me now, I was hallucinating. I was seeing images in the sky, like Buddhas floating in the sky. I was hearing voices. Very powerful stuff it was. I actually ended up in a river. Now, it wasn't suicide, but it was delusional thoughts that led me to the river. So I got into the river. I nearly drowned. Somebody, I actually, in the river now, I felt I was being tested by God. And I felt I was a bad person. And if I got into the river, when I get through the river, if I drowned it, I'd get a restart of being in creation again. I'd come back as a worm and build myself up again. But this was a second chance. And every time I went under the water and I came up again, I'd have a sensation just for a few seconds that I got my soul back, that it was okay. And then it would go again. I feel I had to go back into the water. But I did go under the water a few times. And I came back out. And then I got my soul back and I was delighted. But at this stage now, I was hypothermic. I passed out on a rock in the river. But somehow somebody found me. I got into hospital. When I eventually woke up, I was covered in tinfoil blankets. But they said that you're very lucky. Call it, your body temperature had fallen 3 degrees below life sustainable. So as they were saying, you're very lucky to be here. So that was the age of 23. And even at that age, now the parents knew, or my family knew, there was obviously something wrong. But the communication wasn't good in my family. I never sat down with the family and really discussed what happened. And always I kept it to myself, I did, you know. So that'd be a continuous theme for me with the alienation. And I think that quite often, I think that was behind the schizophrenia, in my opinion, anyway.
It sounds like from the cheese sandwiches onwards, you know, that you couldn't express how you felt about anything.
Yeah, I didn't show my true colors and everything was bottled up. So at that stage now, so a couple of years later, when I was 25, finishing up college, I had another breakdown. This time it was an elation that went very high, that eventually went psychotic, but it was an elation. But at this stage, everybody knew. People on the course, my peers on the course, friends and family, neighbors, everybody. So at that stage now, you could say, in a way, funny enough, that was when it really hit me that I have a really, you know, I've got a bad mental illness as such. That really hit me, you know.
That must have been difficult for you, since you kept everything to yourself up until that point. For everyone to know, it must have been really hard.
It was. You know, how would you say it? As I was saying, a couple of things were going on. Back then, there wasn't the insight now and the openness about mental illness. And then I also didn't have any great insight into myself and what was going on with myself. I think when I was growing up, even though I was kind of alienated, I was the type of person that my sense of identity came from outside, what other people would think of me. And quite often in my mind, I'd be kind of running through scenarios thinking, trying to look good in my mind, come across well. So I was very alienated from myself. So not only was I alienated from other people, I was also alienated from my own true self and what I wanted, who I was, and how I was feeling, because I was putting up a front. And that's where Grow came in for me, and that was very good. Now, I first came to Grow when I was 23, so that was actually just after I ended up in the river. But at that stage, when I was at 23 there, I was a very young man, and I was trying out different things. So I came to Grow. Now, I only stayed for about 3 months, and I left. Now, I can't remember exactly why I left, but I think it was on the lines of just trying out different things. I was trying out homeopathy and Bach remedies and what you call it, transcendental meditation. I was trying out all sorts of things. I suppose I was starting to go on a bit of a search. I suppose as I was getting into that age, I was, as I said, alienated from myself and others and from the world, not knowing who I was, what I wanted. I was struggling all right. I was starting to look for answers. Now, I came back to Grow when I was 30. And funny enough, I just came back to Grow because I bumped into a chap that was in the meeting when I was 23. And I liked the chap. And there was another guy that I also liked in the meeting. And they were both still in the meeting. So I said to myself, I'll pop along, just to say hello for old time's sake. And I stayed, and I've been in Grow since. So initially for me, what was fantastic was, at that stage now, I had a better understanding of myself. So especially that first year, giving my testimony, listening to other people's testimonies, that was very healing. So I was starting to show my true colors. What was also fantastic was those two chaps that I was friendly with, they both had a similar diagnosis to me. So I was with people that were similar, the same. I had lots in common, good company. And obviously, slowly over the years and Grow, you're slowly revealing yourself, what you were struggling with life with. So yes, I think that for me was the best part of Grow initially. I noticed over the years in Grow, I made lots of friends. And in a way, it was like family. And every time I went to a meeting, I learned something new. And also, invariably, if I went to the meeting troubled by something, worried about something, I would come out both comforted and a bit wiser and a bit more support. So I might do a task that I was given, come back next week and report. Grow was a safe environment, it was. And what was kind of also very good about it is that you could empathize with other people and they could empathize with you. And that was very healing, it was. In a strange way, it was quite grounding as well, actually. You kind of felt more real. It's a bit like when you watch a film or art, it's a mirror that reflects you. And that's quite often with Grow. I could really relate to other people and empathize with them. And that was very healing. And it's also kind of making me feel more solid and real because I can realize, yeah, that's me too. Mm. I think it slowly actually gave you a bit of strength, that kind of ability to be empathized, feel the same as others, feel more solid and real in yourself as well. Mm. It's very grounding.
And I'm wondering, because you had such a fear of revealing yourself to other people, and then when everyone found out, was it as bad as you thought it would be, that experience?
Yes and no, I suppose, yeah. I think quite often that very summer of 95, that said when I was 25, I had that elation in the hospital and everybody knew about it. I was in and out of hospital 3 times that summer. First in with an elation, psychotic, then a bad depression, back in with another elation, psychotic. In a way, it slowly dawned on me because I was still a little bit delusional, I was, even when I was getting out at that stage. So it was a slow process. Yeah. I think also what's quite difficult was the year after that time that I came out of hospital that time, I tried to get some work. I had trained as an illustrator. So I went around a few different, design agencies, showing my portfolio. And I got some work, but I didn't get any follow-on work. What was happening was, because I was still slightly delusional, my judgment was off. So when I did a picture, in my mind, it was great, fantastic, but it wasn't because my judgment was off. And I think also maybe I was coming across a bit strange as well. So I was getting some work, but no follow-on work. So it was slowly dawning on me that I was, how would you say it? I am definitely not the same as others. I was struggling at that stage. I realized I was eventually dawned on me that I was struggling. I think maybe over the next number of years, I end up in hospital 17 times. So I think you're right. I think it's most difficult for anybody with mental illness when they first realize, or they first get very ill, or the very first when it comes very public for family and friends. There is a stigma. It's difficult. I think also, especially when you're young, especially maybe for a man, maybe I'm only guessing, you have this ego. You want to succeed in the world. And you're finding out that you're not succeeding in the world. You're actually struggling. And you're not keeping up with your peers. And you may even lose friendship with your peers because you don't have anything in common with them anymore. So you're right. I think the first few years are probably the toughest. After a few years, you're growing in wisdom how to cope, but you're also starting to accept who you are and how things are. Now, for me, that took a long time because I was out of touch with myself now. I would have been out of touch with the world. I would have been very maybe immature. I actually didn't feel like an adult until I was about the age of 39. My father had passed away and my mother had passed away at that stage, but my father's partner was still alive. And I kind of helped her get to did some shopping for her and help her get to doctor's appointments and that. And that and a few other things. I became student chairperson of this course. Only at that stage that I started to feel like an adult. So yeah, the stigma, slow progress, come to terms with who you are, with yourself. And for me, it was a slow process of maturing, it was. But definitely, the first few years are definitely, I think, the toughest, all right.
Is there any part of you that looks on your decline as a good thing?
Strange, yes. In a way, I know there's part of the growth program where they say that quite often, eventually, you might view your breakdown as eventually a breakthrough to a better life. I think that was the case with me. I think with Grow, as I said, I made some genuine friendships. Things changed. I would no longer cared at all about the rat race at all. And leave the rat race to the rats, So I'd say it was difficult up to that age because you're still identifying with the world, which is, success or, looking good or married or kids or good career, which I have none of these things. I remember one time now, I was actually going into A&E. I actually had a psychotic episode. I was getting myself into hospital, turned up in A&E. I said to the lady behind the counter, when you have to first go in, you have to go give your details, show where you live, hospital. They'll ask you, are you working, marital status, etc. So I remember she was asking me, where you work? And I said, no, just a bit of volunteer work. And she said, marital status, and I said, single. And then jokingly, I said, that sounds really bad. And I remember she looked up and looked me in the eye and she says, you don't know how lucky you are. So, and I remember at that age as well, and myself and my friend, we'd often go, what you call it, jump on the train or the bus somewhere, we'd go to a beach or a mountaintop, we'd have a flask of coffee and sandwiches. And we'd often think, gosh, the rest of the Dublin are sitting in front of a computer terminal working hard, and here's us. So in a way also, I was lucky actually as well. Like I still do a bit of art, and not to get religious, but I got very much into meditation and mindfulness. And so, as I said, I do the newsletter Fleece region. So I'm busy and I have meaning in my life as well. No pressure as such, voluntary work, because I think that affects a lot of people with serious mental illness. They find it very hard to handle pressure. But I keep myself busy. My family are good to me. I do the bit of artwork. I like reading spiritual books, meditating, contemplating, reading, getting out in nature. So strangely, well, I think a lot of people find they get a bit happier when they get older. I'm a lot happier now than I was when I was in my 20s. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
That's great. You've come a long way. And I find that, a lot of people who have never suffered a breakdown might still be going through life not accepting themselves because they've never had to go to those places.
Oh, somebody who's never had a breakdown?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I'd imagine so. Um, I don't know for certain, but I'm kind of guessing that maybe maybe some people that never had that experience, maybe uh, their growth as a person maybe slows down a lot.
Mm.
But because I've been exposed to grow and all the different wisdom in grow and the support and the challenge of grow, so I would have grown as a person, obviously from a much lower base, but it's gradual. Let's keep on going. I always learn something new in grow. I've been challenged all the time. So I can't compare myself to others saying I'm more mature or more wiser than other people. I don't know. But for me, yes, growing, it's always a constant thing. And for me, a slow burn, you're always growing a bit wiser and you're growing as a person a bit, you know. So I imagine maybe some other people wouldn't have that exposure to grow or, and, obviously they probably would still grow, but maybe at a slower rate.
Yeah, they mightn't have to face their
Mightn't have the insight or face their demons, as you
yeah
put it.
as
Yeah,
much.
that's true.
Mm.
As much, yeah.
And maybe they could go through life, their full life, putting on a front.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I think a lot of us actually now are we come from that little voice in our head, our thinking ego, and a bit I've learned in the grow is that you're finding and keeping is your or growing is finding and keeping your truest self. And for me, it was that truest self for me was not that little. For me, my thinking egotic mind was always about looking good. Do they like me? Do I look good? Or you know, oh gosh, they don't like me and all this. So that was that inner voice that was not the true self. It was the fears and the identities and the masks and all that. And then the true identity for me was when I'm relaxed and calm and peaceful. And, I'm not in that place of fear from the ego. I'm just here. I'm comfortable with people. That's, as I said about the alienation, gosh, it took a long time to lift. Even when I was grow, I was still maybe quite elated for a long while. But yes, it eventually evaporated. I don't feel that intense feeling of alienation anymore, which thank God I don't. It was an awful feeling it was. Now, meditation and mindfulness has something to do with it as well, because as I was saying about finding keeping your true self, meditation mindfulness is about waking up that you're not this egotic thinking voice that's always talking in your head. The real you is that part that's actually that can be aware of it, that can be aware of your thinking. So the real part of you is silent and here and now and peaceful. And it's not alienated. And it's not afraid. Now, having said that, I'm still a very timid person. And I deal a lot with fear. I not as bad as I was, not alienated, but I still feel quite a lot of fear. So it's a slow growing, maturing process all the time.
Yeah.
And you probably never get to the very end, but you always do a little bit.
Yeah, you enjoy the process of learning.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to be, was he 100% well? But things are better, and there is some meaning, and it's slow.
And today we're discussing step 12 in this 12 steps of recovery and growth, which is we carried Grow's message to others in need.
Yes. Okay. How did that work out for me now? Let me see now. Well, okay. Yes, I've definitely made lots of friends in Grow over the years. Now, some of them I've even left at this stage, Grow. They kind of like, at that stage, they felt like your Grow was giving them a lot and they were moving on. And I would have keep in touch with them. And quite often we might ring each other for support when we're feeling troubled or upset or going through a difficult few days. And invariably we quote Grow wisdoms to each other because they're kind of ingrained in you. They're kind of almost like sort of like kind of a second language, and they kind of you kind of absorb them nearly over the years, just simple things like, you one day at a time, or this too will pass, or you're more durable and vulnerable. There's a few hundred gross wisdoms, but we're familiar with it and it helps. Well, I think also over the years now, with the different area coordinators that would have been running our group in Dublin, in our area, quite often they have to give talks in day hospitals or different other mental health organizations. And sometimes the area coordinator asked me to go along to give a testimony. So the area coordinator would discuss all about Grow, and then he would ask me to do a testimony just to give people a feel of it, from a personal point of view. And also, the last 7 years, I've been doing a newsletter for Eastern Region of Grow. It started off as a 4-page publication, but now it's up to 12 pages. It comes out quarterly. Now, it gets handed out to different growers. A lot of those growers, it'd be in the house, so other family members be picking up and reading it. Some of the newsletters also get to surgeries and day hospitals. People will be picking up, looking at. I think even if one person was to read it and they got just one little snippet of wisdom out of it, that'd be a really good thing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people living alone who didn't have access to Zoom during the COVID pandemic, they were getting these newsletters, and that was their only kind of interaction with anyone, even though it was through a newsletter, but it was a way of hearing other people's stories.
That's it.
Yeah. It's a real traditional old school way of getting in touch with other people.
I think it's good. I think, obviously the newsletter was also an e-version, but we also printed a physical version out. We might have printed off 200, 250 copies at one stage. I think, as you were saying there, I think holding something physical in your hands is better than reading the newsletter online as an e-newsletter. I think online you're inclined to flick through really quickly. You're not exactly connecting with the articles as much when you use something physical. I think when you sit down with the physical newsletter, I think it's more personal or intimate, and you take it on board. You read slower, and you're inclined, instead of just flicking through and scanning through it, you take your time and you read the whole article. Yeah. And yes, so you always hope I'm always hoping maybe somebody might leave the newsletter on the bus or something. Who would find it? Maybe they're meant to find it.
You should drop a few in random locations.
You never know. Somebody might pick it up, all right. Might need it.
Yeah, well, it's great. It's great what you're doing, and you are carrying Grow's message definitely to other people in need. And who knows how many people have been influenced by what they've read and how it's affected the people that they know, and how they behave in the world. So it could have a huge knock-on effect. And another thing that we ask is more of a difficult question, but you might need a few minutes to think about it. But how would you sum up Grow in one word?
One word. The first word just popped into my head is community.
Oh, good. That's a really good word. Yeah.
Just popped in immediately.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's in line with the theme of today, which is step 12. So
yes. Yes. I know the word community comes from commune. And for me, I suppose that's relevant because I think behind my mental illness was just alienation. So the opposite of alienation is communing with people, connecting with people. And I think for very much start from it, when I stepped in the door, it was safety, as you were saying, not being judged. People that were similar to me, telling your story, relating to people, feeling at home, sharing. We often not only do we have a meeting where we discuss our problems, we meet socially once a week. This is before the pandemic, but before the pandemic, we meet socially once a week. You make friends. It's like family. Once or twice a week or a year, not at the moment of the COVID, but we go weekends away, so you'd meet other people from other grow groups around the country, and you got something in common. You can really relate. It's the empathizing, the sharing. It's healing. It's very healing.